All right, hello everyone. This is Richard Carlton. I'm here.
Jesse Barnum, president of 360 Works.
And we're talking about the MirrorSync product that these folks have had. And we've done recordings before, Jesse, with your product.
MirrorSync 2.
MirrorSync 2, about how people can take an offline copy of a database out in the desert or somewhere else, use it locally, and then press a button and it syncs back to the FileMaker server. That's kind of the normal default
that client
kind
server
of
model. You're working on your iPad in a place where you either have slow or limited Wi-Fi or 3G connectivity or LTE. Want to be able to have your own offline copy and sync it with the server. MirrorSync 2 did that great.
Great. So my question to you is then, what do we have at DevCon in 2016? You have a new product now?
Yep, so we've got a major new release of MirrorSync. It's MirrorSync version 3.
Okay.
Does all the same stuff MirrorSync 2 did, except for faster and better.
Okay.
But we've got some significant new server-to-server functionality, which is what I'm going to be showing in this demo. And by the way, this is the first time that anybody has seen this demo.
Wow.
Nobody has seen what I'm about to show you except for me.
Okay, so one of the things we're talking about today is
clustering, load balancing, replication.
And replication.
Using MirrorSync 3, right.
All right, cool.
Right. I'm going to be using Amazon Web Services for my demo. I've got a couple Amazon Web Services servers, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit about what they do.
Cool. So before we get going, what is replication?
So replication is essentially just getting two or more servers to all share the same data as each other.
So we were talking about this in a video the other day where if we had an East Coast server in the United States, West Coast server, maybe how about one in Europe somewhere?
Sure, yeah, we can do multi-spoke replication.
But why wouldn't everyone just use one server?
So if you are in East Coast, West Coast in Europe, then if you put the server in one of those places, it's going to be fast for that one place, but then really slow for the other two.
All right, so the distance between you and the server matters. So you want the shortest distance possible.
Right, FileMaker is very sensitive to latency, ping times, and ping times are directly a function of geography.
Okay, so the farther you are from a FileMaker server in general, the slower it will run.
Absolutely.
So the idea is to build a local server, maybe not necessarily to the town you're in, but to maybe the part of a continent you're in or country you're in.
East Coast versus West Coast. You know, I mean, if you're in Europe, then you're going to want your server somewhere in Europe. It doesn't necessarily need to be
Australia. A lot of FileMaker users in Australia and Japan.
Right. Now, what I'm demoing tonight is replication, but in a different sense. It's not geographic replication, it's clustering replication. So what I'm going to actually show is two servers running almost side by each other in the same data center.
So let's talk about clustering as opposed to replication. So replication, we got servers separated. You're talking about two servers. Clustering is multiple servers side by side to handle a heavy load, because it's more than really what one server should be able to do.
Yeah, there's really two reasons to do clustering. There might be two reasons I can think of offhand. One is load balancing. So, you know, if you've got 100 users accessing one server, and now you need to go to 200 users, the server can handle that great, but if it can't, then you could solve that problem by adding a second server, putting those 100 people in that second server, and then using a replication tool like MirrorSync, you would be able to make it so that both of those servers always have the same set of data as each other, so that the users in server 1 are seeing the same thing as the users on server 2.
And this comes up, people always ask, you know, well, how does Amazon or YouTube stream all these videos?
Yeah.
Because they cluster
thousands of servers.
Yeah, lots of servers.
Yes.
That many? Thousands of servers?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
in Google's case, hundreds of thousands.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so we're clustering a couple, 2, 3, 5, whatever.
Yeah, we're going to start with 2.
We're going to start with 2.
We'll work our way up to hundreds of thousands.
Later on.
Maybe MirrorSync 4.
MirrorSync 4, okay.
There's another reason for clustering that I'm going to bring up in my demo, which is failing.
Oh, okay,
So it's nice that you can handle more users on 2 servers, but a really cool thing is if one of the servers dies, then at least you can limp along on the other server until you get your first server working instead of everyone just being down.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so show us what we have. I see FileMaker. That's the one thing I recognize.
Yep, so we got FileMaker here. So I've set up the cluster on Amazon using Elastic Load Balancer. That's a feature of Amazon Web Services that they offer. And what it does basically is they give you an endpoint that you can use for FileMaker server that isn't really a FileMaker server. It's like a proxy, and it'll automatically channel all the requests to one of your instances that's running FileMaker server.
So this is a service by Amazon called
Elastic Load Balancer.
Elastic Load Balance.
Yep. And so you connect to the Elastic Load Balancer. Amazon will keep track of how many connections you have to each server, and it'll connect you to whichever one is next.
Okay, so we call that ALB. Do they refer to it that way?
ELB.
ELB. Yeah, ELB. Okay, so ELB is going to direct traffic to whichever server is less busy.
I think it actually just does it in a round robin fashion. So it's always going to do 1, 2, 1, 2,
back
1,
and forth.
2, 1, 2.
Okay, cool.
So what I've got here is I've got 2 FileMaker clients connected. I've got my iPhone right here. And if we look in the title bar there, if you notice, it says Tasks Cluster 2.
Okay.
And then on my laptop here, it says Task Cluster 1.
Okay.
I connected them both to the elastic load balancer is simply called Cluster.
Okay.
And then it automatically routed my iPhone to instance number 2, and it routed this one to number 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And so that just happened automatically. And so I don't need to know as a user whether I'm connecting to 1 or 2. In fact, if I named these servers the same things in the FileMaker Server admin console, the user would not even have any way of knowing which server they're connecting to at all.
Okay.
I intentionally named them differently so we can tell that we're connecting to 2 different servers.
Okay, cool.
So on my phone, I've got 25 records, and on my laptop, I've got 25 records.
Okay, great.
So let me go ahead and create a new record on my phone. Video demo with Richard.
Okay.
And now I have 26 records on my phone.
Okay.
I still only have 25 records on my
So
laptop.
this is where MirrorSync comes into balance or replicate the data.
Exactly. What you're seeing right now is what you get if you do all this without MirrorSync. You're going to basically wind up with different data on your 2 servers.
Okay. So now how does it get up to
So I've
date?
got MirrorSync set up in the background here. I've got my configuration for my AWS cluster.
Okay.
I'm going to run a sync. So you just saw the sync ran, and I got one insertion that popped this over from my iPhone to my FileMaker server. So yeah, I ran the sync here, and we got our one insertion. So now when I go into FileMaker, I've got my 26 records.
Okay, so the obvious question is that I don't want to have to press the button to align the servers.
Good question. I wouldn't either. So I'm going to sync this every 5 seconds.
Ooh, super cool. Now, what interface is this over here that we're seeing? This config client. What am I looking at here? This isn't FileMaker.
No, it's not. This is the interface that you get when you install MirrorSync on the server. So MirrorSync is a product that you download from our website. You run the installer on your FileMaker server, and once you install it, you'll get this program available to you to run either on the server or from remotely from your own computer to configure the synchronization process. This is not something that you need to leave running all the time.
Wow, this is really a big deal. This is huge.
Isn't it?
I mean, so if I put a record over here, I'm going to steal the computer and I'm going to put the record in over here. And I'll just say Jesse interview, and then so I'm going to go ahead and click out on the laptop and save the record, and then at some point,
notice that this thing in the background just changed. One insertion, and so now on my phone, now I've got 27 records.
So within 5 seconds, we had synchronization.
And there's Jesse interview on my phone.
Wow.
So this just transferred between those 2 FileMaker servers running on Amazon. And so even though I'm connected from my laptop and my phone to those 2 different servers, I'm seeing the same underlying data, and it's refreshed every 5 seconds.
You know, I could really see customers, they call us and they say, hey, we've got people in the U.S., I got people frequently lately in Singapore and places like that. And
Singapore is a good one because there's actually an Amazon data center
there. So you could put the FileMaker server there. You could put the server in the U.S. or Europe, and then you could use this. And this software will sync more than one server?
Yes, it will.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm a little bit blown away here. It's hard to make me speechless, but this is stuff that we've been dreaming about. I mean, I've been in the FileMaker business now 26 years. We could always kind of script this, but it was always a hack. And you had to have a FileMaker client that ran on a robot, and the robot had to be super reliable. So this is a service. This window over here is part of a service that runs on one of the FileMaker servers does this?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I can quit out of this, and that sync is still running.
So it's a service running in the background.
It's a service running in the background.
What kind of reliability are we talking here? I mean, because the alternative, once again, the old school alternative was we set up a robot, some sort of Mac Mini or something sitting somewhere, and it connects to the servers, and it does this when it's there, but then it gets disconnected, it has to reconnect.
Yes.
It loses connection, then what happens if you lose connection? Does this thing check, or how does this work?
It will remember the last time it successfully synced, and it will continuously try every 5 seconds, and once it reconnects, it will pull all the changes from the last time that it was able to successfully sync.
What kind of technology is being used to move the data back and forth? I mean, we're not talking FileMaker client here, obviously.
No, we're
it's not like copy-paste commands in a script.
There are two ways that you can do a MirrorSync. To answer your question, there's XML web publishing, which we've always had.
Right.
And then in version 3, a new option that we have is using JDBC.
Why would I want to use one over the other?
That is a good question, and there's a lot of pros and cons. We discuss it in more detail in our documentation. Essentially, to give a really high-level overview, JDBC is generally faster and more memory efficient than XML.
Okay.
XML is generally faster over a wide area network connection.
Okay.
So if you were syncing between Europe and Singapore and America, I would probably use XML.
Okay.
If I'm syncing between two servers in a cluster, I would probably use JDBC.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really good answer. That's the kind of answer we need in videos like this, because that helps us explain all this. That's great.
Okay.
And of course, you can always do a deep dive with Jesse, talk to him and their team, get additional information on the product. Now, licensing on this, is it the same? Is it different?
So licensing, I think it's like $1,600 for a server-to-server sync, but I'll check it on the website.
Okay.
But I've got something else cooler to show than this.
Well, what could be cooler than replication and clustering?
To me, it's cooler because it was harder.
To program.
Okay. All right. This is really neat. So what we're seeing right now is you're seeing clustering in action. You're seeing, remember we talked about there's really two benefits of clustering. There's failover and there's load balancing.
Yeah.
We're seeing load balancing in action right now.
That's mostly what we've been talking about, yeah.
Yes. So let's talk about failover.
Okay.
If one of these servers were to go down, and I'm going to do something that you should not try at home. This is my second cluster node right here.
Okay, so it's a server, FileMaker server.
Yes,
you're calling it a cluster node.
But
that's a fancy. That's a fancy way for normal people of saying it's one of the servers in our cluster.
Exactly.
So if you have 10 servers in a cluster, then each of those servers would be a node.
A node, yes.
New words for us to learn.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So this is my second cluster server.
Yes.
And this is running on Amazon.
Okay.
This is actually running in San Francisco. We're here in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And I'm going to do something terrible, which is I'm going to go to Process Explorer. I'm going to find the FileMaker server process.
Just kill it?
And I'm going to kill it dead.
Wow.
If I can find it.
This would normally cause people to be disconnected, all sorts of bad things.
And it would corrupt the file as well.
Oh, yeah.
If you just hard kill like that, you're probably corrupting your
file.
And
that goes back to all our training where we tell everyone always roll on a crash to the last good backup. It's like written in stone. If there were the 10 commandments, the 11th one was thou shalt not use a crash database, right?
That's right. And within a few seconds, if I go to my load balancer.
So we're on Amazon's configuration screen.
Yes, this is where you configure the load balancers in Amazon, and you can tell it which servers you want to be part of your cluster.
Okay.
So I've got 2 servers in 2 different availability zones. And in Amazon's terminology, availability zones each have their own dedicated internet connection, their own generators, their own power supplies.
But an availability zone could be in the same region. So
availability zones are always in the same region, and they always have sub-millisecond ping times between each other. So it's always very fast.
So when people understand, because you're going to see more and more conversation about Amazon as we go forward, there's a West Coast region, an East Coast region, and a Europe region, but within each region are multiple availability zones.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. And Amazon, I don't want to say the word guarantees because they don't guarantee it, but Amazon states that their design goal is if there was ever a catastrophic problem, it would take down one availability zone, but not multiples, because they are totally redundant from each other.
Cool.
And so
you put 2 nodes of our server cluster, our new words. We're using our words today. 2 nodes of our server cluster, and one's in different availability zones. Probably in the data center, they'd be different parts of the data center, right?
Yeah, they're actually in separate physical buildings from each other.
Oh, really?
Different buildings, different generators.
So when they say there's a fire and it could wipe out one, it couldn't get the other availability zone.
And if a backhoe cuts a major trunk line, it's cutting it to one of the data centers, one of the availability zones.
Wow.
So yeah, it's
this
highly
is cool.
reliable.
So we lost one of the 2 nodes.
Yes.
So what happens now?
And I want to show something here on my iPhone. So you can see on my iPhone, after I killed that second cluster, which my iPhone was connected to, it's saying communication with the host was interrupted. Do you want to try to reconnect? And the auto reconnect won't work, but I can definitely go back and just reopen that database. And what's going to happen is, notice that it switched to cluster 1.
Because
Amazon did that automatically because it knows cluster 2 right here is out of service.
Is out of service. So then you would have to restart that server, that node, right? And then the elastic load balancer, is that what we call it, ELB, would detect that it's back online.
Exactly.
And then it would then start to balance the load.
Yes, it would rebalance the incoming client connections. Let me start MirrorSync back up. So I'm going to go back into my configuration client. And even though I've quit it, that synchronization has been running the entire time in the background every 5 seconds.
But it's just not getting there because it can't see that the one node is functional.
So error 802, unable to open file. It's trying to go to that URL and it's not able to get to it.
Okay.
So that's what we would expect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my cluster. This is dead. I'm going to trash the dead file. In reality, I wouldn't trash it. I'd put it in some damaged file or something.
Yeah, so this is the crash file, to be clear about this. This is the file that was live, that's crashed. And our normal recovery process that we cover in our video training is basically take that file, put it on a folder on the desktop, and mark it as crashed with a date. Then you need to bring back a last good backup.
Mm-hmm. So and then you need to pretty much manually fix whatever's missing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, not now. Watch this.
Not now.
So I'm going to trash my good one. So I am now going to take my last good backup. I'm going to replace my crashed file.
Okay. We always use the last good backup. Always, always, always.
And if I specifically go and open that file, I'm going to bypass the cluster right now.
So you're bypassing the load balancer. You're going directly to server 2.
Mm-hmm. And I need to open that in server admin.
So we actually open the file up. So now it's running. Now this task file should be out of date. So we're going to verify it's out of date by opening up server 2.
And so here I'm directly in cluster 2. I've got 25 records. I don't have the new ones I just created.
So the two that we just built aren't in there.
Aren't in there,
okay.
Correct. So now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to run my sync. And that just did 2 insertions. And there's my 27 records. So now we've recovered all the stuff that we would have normally have had to manually re-enter from our last backup actually came from our cluster 1.
That is so cool.
MirrorSync pulled the recent stuff from cluster 1, put it into cluster 2. We're now completely back up and running. And check this out. If I go back into the Amazon console, if I refresh this, these are now both in service. It's checking it. We're now right back to where we were.
So really, this video should be called "Making FileMaker Work in the Enterprise." For real, because this is like Oracle grade.
This is how enterprises do it.
This is how enterprise do it. You always, everyone says like, well, we have this, Oracle system, and it's $1 billion million and a SQL that integrates, and $1 billion million in Salesforce that's going back and forth, and it's all done with clustering, load balancing, and replication.
Yes.
And you've brought all these basically to the table for us.
What MirrorSync is bringing is the replication part. Amazon is doing the clustering and the load balancing. When you put them all together, now you get the complete package.
Oh my goodness, this is big. Maybe FileMaker can buy this and bundle this in the product. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be awesome. I'd love to work with FileMaker.
Yeah, well, they'd have to write you a check for about $1 billion to put this in there.
But
it would be worth it. People are going to bring up the conversation, the comparison between the current failover strategy that FileMaker has.
Yes. And this is very different from that. For one thing, in the failover scenario, you can't work on both servers at the same time. You can only work on one of them, so you're not getting any of the benefits of load balancing.
Right.
The other thing is that the failover part, if it fails, it's a fairly manual process to bring it over.
Oh, it's a terminal command line. So really the difference is with the hot server, standby server, the idea is that the clients get a little pause, and then if you can go over there to the command line and do this command line, it's really kind of a jungle gym of jumping through hoops. Mm-hmm. Then the clients theoretically don't get disconnected. In your system, if they say disconnect immediately and then reconnect immediately, they immediately, without any delay, go onto the backup server.
Waiting for
and there's no command line, you got to call the server guy, get him to the office, have him remote in.
You also don't need to have identical configurations.
You could have different kinds of FileMaker servers.
You could have one primary big server.
Uh-huh.
You could have multiple smaller servers connected to it. You also don't have another limitation of the FileMaker's built-in failover is that it's only for LAN. This can be used on the LAN or a WAN. So going back to your original point about Europe, California, Singapore, you can use this to replicate between all of them at the same time.
Wow. Right. Well, I like this greatly just from the simplicity of execution standpoint. Not so much about the setup, because I'm not really comparing setups here, although I think yours would be probably pretty simple in that area.
The setup is very, very quick.
But the failover here is basically completely automatic.
Yes.
The failover recovery for FileMaker requires an IT person with a big brain to sit and do command line into the terminal to make it recover.
And a lot of planning in advance to make sure that it's all set up correctly.
Well, and you got to make sure someone's on call. I mean, do you have someone on call 24/7, 365? I mean, we have a lot of engineers, but that's hard for us to even do, right? We have gaps in our coverage, in the middle of the night for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. So, it's to have the server or auto-correct itself.
Yeah, and being able to take advantage of both servers at the same time, instead of essentially having one server that is just an expensive paperweight until it's needed to fail over.
So balanced. So when everything's running great, then you got twice the horsepower.
Yes, exactly.
And then when things go badly, then you have half the horsepower, but it was an automatic transfer.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm a pilot, right? And we've been training in multi-engine turbine helicopters. Okay, and your product works the way that the Bell helicopter does. So you're flying along, and one turbine engine catches fire, quits working. The other one comes on automatically. We have half the power in the helicopter, so it gets exciting, but it still's flying, and I don't have to have a mechanic climb out on the back of the helicopter while it's flying to try to get the second engine transferred. It's automatically balanced all the time.
Right.
So that's funny because it's gone through the training on this. In fact, you call it elastic load balancer, and in the helicopter it's called a C box. It's a box between the two engines that balances them.
Right.
No kidding. I'm dead serious. So that's funny. So you've learned about turbine helicopters today.
Yes.
We've learned about taking FileMaker to the enterprise, or with smaller businesses if you want to take and have a serious deployment with high reliability.
Yes.
An insanely great product from 360 Works. And as a side note, they claim that no one actually watches these videos. So if you see this video and you like it, then you send an email to Jesse at 360 Works and tell him that Richard's video was fantastic, and he will believe that these are valuable to the organization.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, thanks.